Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com. You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got Frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com. And follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter.
Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they aim you to say that.
Bueller.
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio.
The Russ Belville Show, where the truth about marijuana gets more than a minute to speak. The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Today in the Cannabis Focus, we take a look at the Supreme Court of the United States. And following the passing of Justice Scalia, President Obama is set to place another member on the Supreme Court, which the conservative Republicans in the Senate have vowed to block no matter who it is. Well, we now know who that is, and it's a judge named Merrick Garland, and he's cited as being quite a moderate. This may be President Obama's political calculus, figuring if he puts a moderate before those Senate obstructionists and they pass on him, the next person being nominated may be nominated by Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, or Bernie Sanders, and would probably be somebody they would like less. So I imagine that has a lot to do with President Obama's selection in a political, kind of a political wedge to force them to pick the best opportunity, the best nominee they're going to have any shot of hearing from. But as we look at his record, we find something that's disturbing for those of us in the cannabis community, and that is that Merrick Garland, and this is from the Hit and Run blog on Reason, Jacob Sullum has written this morning, that he sided with the DEA in the case over the Controlled Substances Act. And this has to do with the long ongoing battle to get the federal government to reschedule cannabis. As we know, cannabis is scheduled as Schedule 1, meaning it has no accepted medical value in the United States, that it has a high potential for abuse and no recognized safety under the discretion of a physician. Of course, this is absurd, and people have been trying since NORML, way back in the 70s, to sue to overturn this scheduling. This takes us to 2002, where there was the Coalition to Reschedule Cannabis, and they asked the DEA, take it out of Schedule 1, put it in Schedule 3, 4, or 5. The DEA finally got back to that petition in 2011. That's right, 9 years later, they finally took it up and rejected it. Americans for Safe Access got involved with this and challenged this in federal court, saying you can't just reject this because you're being arbitrary and capricious. That's covered in something called the Administrative Procedures Act. Your procedures can't just be arbitrary and capricious. They have to have some sort of backing, some sort of logical foundation. But a 3-judge panel of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, which included Merrick Garland, the Supreme Court nominee, agreed with the DEA. And this has caused a lot of cannabis consumers and people in the movement to have some doubts and questions about Merrick Garland and how he might rule on cases before the Supreme Court. For example, the suit from Nebraska and Oklahoma over Colorado's marijuana legalization, or other cases that may have to do with the scheduling and classification of medical cannabis on a federal level. However, as Jacob Sullum writes, this really has more to do with his interpretation of the broad powers that the DEA has been given in the Controlled Substances Act. And here's the key paragraph he writes. The Controlled Substances Act allows the Attorney General to reclassify drugs if he or she determines that they do not meet the statutory criteria for their current category. And that authority has been delegated by the Attorney General to the DEA. So the DEA has the power to decide whether or not its own rulings match what the law says they can do. Now, Schedule 1, as I mentioned, are only for drugs that have high potential for abuse, no currently accepted medical use, and a lack of accepted safety. Here's the rub. The Controlled Substances Act doesn't define what those terms mean. What does a high potential for abuse mean? What does no currently accepted medical use mean? What does lack of accepted safety mean? That's up to the DEA to decide. So the DEA gets to decide whether or not its own rules comport with its own definitions that it gets to define. That seem like a kangaroo court to you? It sure does to me. But that's the system that we are stuck with under this Controlled Substances Act. So Americans for Safe Access, they argued, well, accepted medical use. What does that mean? We've got 23 states at the time with medical marijuana. We've got U.S. government patents on cannabinoids as neuroprotectants and antioxidants. What more do we need to say accepted medical use? Well, the DEA decided that accepted medical use means it's gone through the FDA trials, large double-blind clinical studies. But of course, marijuana is Schedule 1, so you can't get the marijuana. The federal government has a monopoly on the marijuana. It's the only Schedule 1 drug the federal government has a monopoly on. You can get research heroin, you can get research LSD from numerous sources. Research cannabis you can only get from the National Institutes of Drug Abuse, which doesn't want to give you the research cannabis if you're trying to find out something medical or good about it. So this has been a catch-22 since the beginning of this Controlled Substances Act, and that's what Merrick Garland decided on. The D.C. Circuit upheld, in an earlier case, DEA's definition of accepted medical use, and they brought up the fact that bringing up the catch-22 about Schedule 1 didn't really apply in this case. So the problem is we can't get the change.
What are you people? On dope?
We are not all on dope. We just want our laws to make some sort of sense. We now live in a country where more than half of the people, with the addition of Pennsylvania, more than half of the population lives in a medical marijuana state. How can that not be accepted medical use? All right, it's 20 after. Happy 420 to our friends in the Mountain Time Zone. We'll be back right after this.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Some of the people who were taking marijuana for those purposes, the coroner believes after they died there was drug interactions.
Okay, maybe you're high too.
The Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they aim you to say that.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show.
In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Gotta try this. You know a bad idea when you see one. Live above weed. Live above the influence.
This has been the Russ Belville Show's anti-drug public service announcement of the day, exclusively on RadicalRuss.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children.
Okay, maybe you're high, too.
Arguing for the end of adult marijuana prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It is even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more in this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
Welcome back, everyone. Today in the Drug War Data Mine, we turn to a study that was funded by the National Institute on Drug Abuse, that's NIDA, the Office of National Drug Control Policy, that's the Drug Czar's office, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And the new study has concluded that alcohol has a more extreme impact on drivers than marijuana. Researchers said alcohol, quote, significantly increased lane departures, minimum and maximum lateral accelerations, and these measures were not sensitive to cannabis, end quote. Researchers also concluded cannabis-influenced drivers, quote, may attempt to drive more cautiously to compensate for impairing effects, whereas alcohol-influenced drivers often underestimate their impairment and take more risk, end quote. National Institute of Drug Abuse said this is, quote, the most sophisticated driving simulator of its kind to mirror real-life situations, end quote. Well, folks, this is some of that no-shit Sherlock level of study, something we've known for years and years and years. And the effect is, it comes down to the old joke, right? In humor, there is often a kernel of truth. And the old joke is the difference between a drunk driver and a stone driver is that a drunk driver will run the stop sign. The stone driver will sit there and wait for it to turn green. Right? That's the joke, right? But it's based in a kernel of truth, and that is alcohol impairs both your reactions and your judgment. It impacts you physically and it impacts you mentally. While it makes you physically less able to drive, it makes you mentally think you're more able to drive. That old liquid courage. And we've all had the situation of trying to wrestle the car keys out of one of our drunk friends' hands. I'm fine to drive. I can drive, you know. You've had that experience. By comparison, the marijuana drivers are less impaired, less physically impaired when they get impaired, but think they're more impaired than they actually are. It's the opposite of alcohol. Causes less impairment, but more caution. And that's why marijuana using drivers will often hand over the keys or just not drive. Even in these simulator situations, they'll tell the researchers, man, I'm too high to drive. Now, the study consisted of 19 adults, 13 men in that, and most of them consumed cannabis more than twice a month, but less than 3 times a week. So you got your occasional cannabis consumer. So we're talking about people that don't smoke all the time and thereby build up that tolerance. So these are actually the ones who would be more impaired that we're comparing here than if you put me behind the wheel when I smoke marijuana every day and have developed quite a tolerance. Now, they did a 45-minute driving session in the driving simulator. And they focused on how many times the car left the lane, how many times it weaved in the lane, and what's the speed of the car. And it's all very realistic. According to the researchers, quote, drivers experience acceleration, braking, steering cues, road conditions like gravel, and realistic sounds. And quote, alcohol, but not marijuana, increased the number of times the car actually left the lane and the speed of the weaving, end quote. Now, another thing that's kind of interesting as we look at this is that when they gave the test subjects alcohol, the participants drank alcohol to reach approximately 0.065 blood alcohol. 0.065, under the legal limit, under the 0.08 limit. So we're taking the more likely to be impaired marijuana consumers and the alcohol consumers less likely to be impaired because they're below the legal limit, and we're still crushing them in our ability to drive. So the conclusions from this, they did say marijuana had a less dramatic effect, but it does impair one measure of driving performance, and that was peripheral vision. It said drivers on marijuana tended to have more tunnel vision. Now, the marijuana that they were given to, the level they were given, was up to 13.1 nanograms per milliliter. So 13 nanograms is 2.5 times what the legal limit is set in Washington and Colorado. And still these people are driving better than people at a 0.065 alcohol level. They said the folks that were up to 13 nanograms were weaving in their lane similar to people at a 0.08 blood alcohol. And they also said mixing marijuana and alcohol enhanced the effect on both. So the drivers using both substances, even if they were both below impairment, combining the two made them more impaired. Now, the researchers concluded, and remember, this is a study funded by NIDA, the Drug Czar, and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, concluded, quote, THC concentrations drop rapidly during the time required to collect a blood specimen in the U.S., generally within 2 to 4 hours. Saliva tests can be done without a long wait, but they may not be a precise measurement of the level of impairment. The concern is that having a level will unfairly target individuals not acutely intoxicated because residual THC can be detected in blood for up to a month in chronic tokers.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
All right. Well, maybe you're high, too.
You know Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Now get ready for Herb Age Designs for the proud cannabis consumer. Herb Age Designs, lifestyle gear for the 420 friendly. Herb Age Designs, we've got frisbee golf discs and durable hemp gear. Herb Age Designs, we've got shot glasses, drinking glasses, coffee mugs, and beer cozies. Check us out on Facebook and online at herbagedesigns.com and follow Herb Age and Herb Thrasher on Twitter.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
I support a change in law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere. Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
Welcome back, everybody. We are live in Scottsdale, Arizona at the headquarters of CannabisRadio.com. It's 3:32 Arizona time, and joining us by Skype, we've got Kevin Mamalji from National Normal. Kevin, how are you, sir? Hello, Kevin. Okay, we've somehow lost Kevin. Are you there, Kevin?
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
As someone who is a social worker, I think we really must look at the way we're handling marijuana in this country.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere.
The International Cannabis Business Conference comes to San Francisco, California on February 16th and 17th, 2017. The ICBC San Francisco, Northern California's first business-to-business event since the recent historic election, will bring together top state regulators and industry leaders to discuss permits, business models, and opportunities within the newly enacted laws and landscape. Of course, the ICBC also famously offers some of the best cannabis industry networking, leveraging our worldwide following to connect wholesalers, brands, distributors, investors, and strategic partners. And don't forget to come early for our VIP reception and stay late for our legendary after party. Join us for the longest continuously running cannabis business conference in California at the Hilton San Francisco, Union Square. the one and only International Cannabis Business Conference. Visit internationalcbc.com for tickets today.
Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that.
Are you sure this is legal? I don't know. It's fun though, isn't it?
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
I think that as far as drug legalization, we talk about marijuana, and in terms of medical, I think I am basically for that.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere.
Law to end federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
That marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug.
Some think there won't be room for them in jail. We'll make room.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two, and I didn't like it and didn't inhale.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
Entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Radical Rant. All right, good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Sunday, May 15th, 2016, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. My name is Russ Belville. I'm with cannabisradio.com. I host the live daily talk radio program, The Russ Belville Show, which is the NPR of POT. We are news, analysis, information, opinion, interviews, and more. And today my presentation is entitled, It's Not About Marijuana, It's About Freedom. And the idea here is marijuana prohibition is not only unconstitutional, but it also affects almost all of our civil liberties. CannabisRadio.com is available on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Stitcher. We've got a lot of great programs out there for growers, for enthusiasts, for activists, reformers, researchers. Tommy Chong's got a program on Cannabis Radio, and of course, my program, The Russ Belville Show, is heard live every weekday at 2 o'clock Alaska time, I should say. You can pick it up online live, or you can listen to it as a podcast through iTunes. And we give you the latest news and information, give you the latest interviews, and I travel all across the country giving you kind of the flavor of what's going on in legalization. So what I'd like to start with is the idea that marijuana prohibition itself is fundamentally un-American. There is no legitimate reason why our government should be banning marijuana in any form whatsoever, especially if you take a look back at history and you take a look at our Enlightenment era founding fathers. This was an era when they were championing reason and logic above emotion and tradition. So it's not just unconstitutional for us to be banning marijuana use by adults. It contravenes our natural rights. The natural rights that our Constitution recognizes were endowed not by a king, not by a legislature, but by our Creator. In our Declaration, we state, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Self-evident. They need no defense. They need no proof. These truths are self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And a right being unalienable means that no government, no law, no legislature can repeal that right. It is an inherent right in the people, in the citizens. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Note the phrase, among these. These three aren't the only ones that are unalienable. These are just the first three that we mentioned. But there are plenty of other unalienable natural rights. And notice also that it's the pursuit of happiness. There's not a right to happiness. You merely, as a citizen, as an adult, have the right to pursue happiness as you see fit. So, among these rights, could the right to cannabis be one of those unalienable rights? And I'm going to make the argument that indeed it is. The right to cannabis in America for American adults is an unalienable right. First of all,
take into account that our founders were a bunch of hemp farmers. The foundation of our colonies in the early 1600s was preceded by the English Navy defeating the Spanish Armada in 1588, and there was tens of thousands of acres of hemp being used on those ships for rigging and for sails. So the American people were founded by and dependent on this industrial hemp. In 1632, the Virginia Assembly ordered, quote, that every planter, as soon as he may, provide seed of flax and hemp and sow the same. So the first colonies in the very beginning of this country were being ordered to grow hemp. Virginians at the time, the Virginia colony, could pay their taxes with hemp as well as other cash crops. And finally, the British Parliament, even when we were still being ruled by the British, was providing bounties for hemp growing. So they were promoting the growing of hemp in the colonies to help the British Navy, to help all of the needs there for Britain. Got a nice lithograph there of George Washington overseeing his slaves at Mount Vernon. So much for the all men are created equal part. However, when we look back at that early founding fathers era, a lot of times people in the marijuana movement
you take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
The Russ Belville Show. The voice of the marijuana nation.
It's like marijuana ought to be legalized. Good people smoke marijuana.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
All right, good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Wednesday, February 8th, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the show. We got plenty for you on this Hemp Day, Hump Day, and coming up on the show today, we will start with our cannabis news. In the headlines today, we're looking right here at the state of Oregon, where there is a new bill proposed and supported by Portland NORML that would protect the employment rights of marijuana-using consumers off duty. So we'll take a look at that in our news. In our cannabis focus today, we are going to take a look at Senator Jeff Sessions, who's likely to be approved as Attorney General. We've got our government at work with a review of the latest bills. Our guest today, Michael Krawitz from Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access.
Covering the latest headlines in consumer cannabis, medical marijuana, and industrial hemp. Now your marijuana headlines in 4 minutes and 20 seconds. This is Cannabis News.
This is your cannabis news for Wednesday, February 8th, 2017. Employers in Oregon would be prohibited from banning marijuana use by employees during their days off under a bill introduced in the Oregon Senate. SB 301 would make it unlawful for employers to condition employment on, quote, refraining from using any substance that is lawful to use in Oregon, end quote. Measure 91 legalized recreational marijuana in the state, but it did not affect existing employment law. The bill aims to amend a state law about the use of tobacco to include cannabis and any other substance that is legal in the state. But if a collective bargaining agreement prohibits off-duty use of such a substance, that rule would take precedence. A New Hampshire House committee voted to advance a bill that would make the state the last in New England to finally decriminalize marijuana possession. The legislation, HB 640, would reduce the penalty for possessing 1 ounce or less of marijuana to a violation punishable by a fine of $100 for first-time offenders. Subsequent law enforcement encounters within a period of 3 years would see gradually increasing fines. Under current law, low-level cannabis possession is a misdemeanor, punishable by up to 1 year in jail. On Tuesday, the House Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee voted 14-2 to advance the decrim bill to the House floor. The Wisconsin State Senate has overwhelmingly approved a bill that would make it legal to use a marijuana extract to treat seizures. The measure legalizes possession of cannabidiol oil with a doctor's certification. The chamber adopted the bill on a 31-1 vote Wednesday.
Republican Senator Dewey Strobel was the only senator to vote against it. Parents of children who suffer from seizures say cannabidiol oil, which doesn't produce a high, can ease symptoms. Democratic Senator Chris Larson argued the bill doesn't go far enough, pointing out that importing the oil into Wisconsin would remain illegal. He tried to amend the bill to allow production of the oil in the state, but Republicans refused to revise the measure. The bill goes next to the Assembly. The NFL Players Association's Board of Player Representatives meets in March in Scottsdale, Arizona. DeMaurice Smith, the NFLPA's executive director, has said the union's leadership is preparing a proposal for consideration by the player reps that would lead to the sport's drug policy taking a less punitive approach toward recreational marijuana use by players. That proposal, if approved by the player reps, would be forwarded to the league, which also would have to ratify it for marijuana-related changes to be enacted under the sport's collectively bargained drug policy. The NFLPA's proposal regarding recreational marijuana use is to come while the union separately studies the potential benefits of marijuana as a pain management tool for players and whether it believes that such use should be made permissible. Israel could be on the verge of expanding its significantly small medical marijuana industry in a significant way. In the span of 10 days, the country, known for its history and expertise in medical marijuana research, has seen a flurry of policy moves in the areas of technology development, decriminalization, and the potential export of medical cannabis. Establishing an export market could generate upwards of 1 billion shekels, or $267 million US, in new tax revenue for the country. Member of Knesset Yoav Kish, the export bill's sponsor, told the Jerusalem Post. The advancement of the export legislation comes less than 2 weeks after the country's public security minister endorsed decriminalization and the agriculture ministry pledged investing millions of dollars in 13 medical cannabis research projects. A 3-year-old Irish boy with severe epilepsy has been asked to leave his preschool for using cannabis oil for treatment. Tristan Ford, age 3, from Dunmanway, County Cork, was the first person in Ireland to be legally allowed to use cannabis for medicinal purposes. The youngster, who suffers from Dravet syndrome, was enrolled in a preschool by his mother, Yvonne Callahan, last month. However, Yvonne received a registered letter to her home this week stating there was no longer a place available for Tristan at the preschool in Bantry. This has been your Cannabis News for Wednesday, February 8th, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
These ingredients used to make crystal meth cost about $30. But the real cost is much greater. If you see suspiciously used items like these in your neighborhood, call 574-LMPD.
This has been the Russ Belville Show's anti-drug public service announcement of the day, exclusively on RadicalRuss.com.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, firedupLawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
If the price of the pot matters, you're smoking too much pot.
Okay, maybe you're high too. Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that. You're a loony. A public service message from the Russ Belville Show. The world of cannabis is evolving at a frenetic pace. The Russ Belville Show gets behind the headlines to take a deeper look at breaking news in our Cannabis Focus.
Today in the Cannabis Focus, we're taking a look at the United States Senate, where they are currently, at this moment, debating the nomination of Jefferson Beauregard Sessions to be our next Attorney General. Taking a look at the live stream right now, Tim Kaine, the senator from Virginia, is currently speaking with regards to that nomination. Let's take a listen in real quick, see what the former vice presidential candidate has to say.
Administration, I believe that independence is even more necessary. I oppose Senator Sessions, who is a friend, who is someone I respect for this position, because I believe his record raises doubts about whether he can be a champion for those who need this office most, and it also raises doubts about whether he can curb unlawful overreach by this executive. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
That's Senator Tim Kaine speaking live on the floor of the United States Senate at this very moment as the senators are discussing the nomination of Jeff Sessions. Now, the news on this last night was pretty shocking. I saw this happen live. I couldn't believe I saw it. Senator Elizabeth Warren was in front of the podium speaking to the Senate, voicing her opposition to Senator Sessions' nomination. And she began to read from a letter by Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. Martin Luther King. Understand that Jeff Sessions had been nominated in 1986 for a position with the federal judgeship, basically. And when he was nominated for this federal judgeship, it was pointed out that the man had quite a racist past as the Attorney General of the state of Alabama. And Coretta Scott King's letter goes into detail about how Jeff Sessions opposed the Voting Rights Act and opposed, basically threw roadblocks in the way of African Americans who were trying to vote while he was the Attorney General of Alabama. And these allegations against Jeff Sessions back in 1986 were so damning that he was rejected for that federal judgeship. Now, some of you listening may not have been alive in 1986. I sure was. It was my freshman year of college. Actually, my sophomore year of college. We had just put in the blue turf at Boise State. And if you were too racist for 1986, that's really saying something. Because this was a time when you could still make the movie that had, what was it, Pretty in Pink, that had the Long Duck Dong character. The most racist Asian character since Mickey Rooney back in the, what was it, Diamonds or Girl's Best Friend? What was the movie that was? Anyway, old 50s movie. 60s? Not sure. Anyway, you could still have movies like Long Duck Dong. You had that 1986 movie, and Samantha Bee did a great job pointing this out, Soul Man, where a white guy, C. Thomas Howell, plays the whole movie in blackface. The whole point of the movie is that he's painting himself black to get an affirmative action scholarship. You could be that racist in a movie in 1986, but Jeff Sessions was too racist for 1986. And yet now it appears he's a lock to be confirmed as our nation's next Attorney General. Now, this Jeff Sessions is no friend to marijuana. We have mentioned before how he has his famous quote that good people don't smoke marijuana. Here's a look at some of the things that Senator Sessions says. And this isn't ancient history, folks. This goes back to April. This was a hearing that went on last April about international narcotics control, and the discussion began to get into how the Obama administration was not paying serious enough attention to what was going on in Colorado and Washington state when it came to marijuana and it being legalized. And Sessions was very adamant about how the federal government was making a huge mistake, how the Obama administration was not standing up against legalization, wasn't doing anything to try to keep the states from legalizing, not doing anything to thwart them from moving ahead on marijuana legalization. So this was a very serious session that took place. Let me give you some of the audio from that so you can just hear from his own mouth what Jeff Sessions thinks of marijuana.
Mr. Wagner, the issue is bigger than the technical matter we're discussing today, in my opinion. This is a huge, huge issue. I was United States Attorney when President Reagan was elected in the early 80s. Half the high school seniors in America had used an illegal drug. That over 12, 15 years went to less than half that, less than 25%. Would you say that was an advantage, a health advantage to young people in America, that drug use declined?
I will stipulate that certainly less drug use is better.
All right. What about marijuana legalization in Colorado? Did you take a public position on that?
I do not take public positions on political issues. I think generally that's a bad policy for U.S. attorneys. We try to maintain our role as the enforcers of law, not the makers.
I know the tension on that. But in the past, U.S. attorneys, drug czar, has opposed it. Does President Obama oppose states adopting legalization of marijuana?
I don't know exactly what positions he's taken with respect to Colorado and Washington.
That's a terrible comment. But the United States Attorney that works for the President of the United States not know whether he opposes or favors legalization of marijuana. He certainly has said some things that indicate he thinks it's a very little problem. But these data show that it is. So you got this huge increase in marijuana-related emergency room visits. This is as obvious as night following day. You make more marijuana, more available. You basically say it's not very dangerous and that young people have a right to participate with it, and others, older people do too. You're going to have more problems. Wouldn't you agree?
I certainly think that increases in marijuana use are bad, and for public health, I totally agree with that. And I think there's been an increase recently. Certainly here out in Sacramento, my district, our focus is on opioid and heroin increase, which has been quite an unfortunate upturn in overdose prescription pills. I know in the Sacramento area, just in the last 10 days, we've had 9 people die from fentanyl overdoses. And that's something which we are.
Heroin or just fentanyl?
No, not heroin. They are apparently prescription drugs that have been laced with fentanyl, and that is something that we've been spending sort of 24/7 the last
huge
2
issue,
weeks.
But just from my experience in dealing with, we need to set a nationwide. We need a nationwide understanding about the problem. This is very real. Are you aware that the American Medical Association just last year issued a report that hammered this idea that marijuana is not dangerous? And they were particularly concerned about the mental impacts it has on young people. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
Do you have any doubt about that?
I don't have any doubt about that, Your Honor.
Did the drug czar of the United States of America make any express any opinion to Colorado about possible dangerous impacts of marijuana legalization in Colorado?
I know the drug czar has been quite articulate about some of the dangers associated with marijuana. In fact, Mr. Botticelli, when he was just before he became drug czar, came out to California with us and participated in some marijuana enforcement operations where we went up into the North State, flew over some very large marijuana grows in the course of our operation. So I know he's been quite committed to supporting us. In fact, he supported an expansion of the HIDA to do more enforcement in our district on marijuana.
Well, what I want to just say to you and those who might be listening is it's far more important than just details of whether the federal prosecutors start prosecuting marijuana cases in Colorado. Colorado was one of the leading states that started the movement to suggest that marijuana is not dangerous. And we're going to find it, in my opinion, ripple throughout the entire American citizenry. We're going to see more marijuana use. Not going to be good. We're going to see more other drug use, illegal drug use, also damaging. I mean, we need grown-ups in charge in Washington to say marijuana is not the kind of thing that ought to be legalized. It ought not to be minimized, that it's in fact a very real danger. You can see the accidents, traffic deaths related to marijuana jumped 20%. These are the kind of things that we're going to see throughout the country, and you'll see cocaine and heroin increase more than it would have, I think, had we not talked about it. Well, is there any sense that Colorado might reevaluate what they've done?
I know that there is a lot of discussion back and forth between the U.S. Attorney's Office and the state authorities in Colorado about issues that we're seeing, issues that we're concerned about. I understand that the state authorities have been receptive to our concerns. I don't know the details of what they're doing about them, but citing some of the data that Senator Grassley presented earlier, we're concerned about that data, and we're talking to Colorado about it. I know the same is true in California.
I hope you'll speak out. I mean, you're able to, as a citizen of Colorado, say you think this is dangerous. I work with it every day. I see the danger and damage it does, and I think the president needs. I think one of his great failures, it's been obvious to me, is lax treatment and comments on marijuana.
One of his big failures.
I experimented with marijuana a time or two.
Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you for being the cannabis crusader out there. You're a trusted voice in the industry, so keep doing what you do. I really appreciate it.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere. Warning, hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that.
This sucks. I hate... Yeah.
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show.
Reforming America's marijuana prohibition laws takes education, lobbying, and voting. From Washington, D.C. to your state capital to your city hall, marijuana law reform involves all levels of civic life. Learn how you can make your impact with elected officials as we take a look at our government at work.
Today at Government at Work, we're going to take a look at some of the states that are moving forward on marijuana reform legislation. In Georgia, we've got a couple of bills to talk about. First of all, Georgia is one of those states that already has a limited medical marijuana law, what we like to call a CBD-only law that allows certain patients to get cannabidiol oil, the non-psychoactive constituent of cannabis. Well, that limited medical marijuana law could be expanded to include autism. Currently, it deals mostly with seizure disorders, epilepsy, and such, but this could be expanded to include autism under Senate Bill 16. It passed Tuesday out of a state Senate committee, but some medical marijuana advocates are opposed to this bill. The CBD bill, or the CBD law currently in the state of Georgia, allows the CBD oil to have a maximum of 5% THC. And this is pretty unique among the CBD only states. Most of them allow, less than 1%, even 0.3% THC, basically, industrial hemp levels. Georgia's was better than most in allowing 5% THC. This Senate Bill 16 that would add autism would reduce the allowable amount of THC from 5% down to 3%. So it's a very difficult political trade-off. You want to add autism, but you don't want to lower that THC level. That would harm a lot of the patients who need it. Now, parents who have children who take this cannabis oil testified that the 5% THC is necessary. If it's lowered to 3%, it could have a devastating effect on their kids. Now, the state senator who is sponsoring this is Ben Watson, a Republican out of Savannah. He's also a medical doctor. And he said that this rollback, the reduction down to 3%, was in response to some concerns over the law from senators. And it allows patients to have up to 20 ounces of this cannabis oil for cancer, Parkinson's, epilepsy, and 5 other conditions. And too many of them are afraid that with the 5% THC, it may somehow be abused. I can assure you this is ridiculous. Nobody in the adult use market is looking for 5% THC. There's another bill, a much broader piece of legislation to expand the list of eligible illnesses. That's being considered currently in the House. House Bill 65 is expected to be moved forward today. Representative Alan Peake, the Republican from Macon, is leading this bill. He's in the House Medical Cannabis Working Group. It would expand the list of illnesses to include Alzheimer's disease, autism, HIV/AIDS, intractable pain, post-traumatic stress, and Tourette's syndrome. Then another bill in Georgia, Senate Bill 105, is a decriminalization bill that has been proposed. This would subject people possessing up to a half an ounce of marijuana to a fine not to exceed $300. If it's between half an ounce to 2/3 of an ounce, it would be a misdemeanor, 12 months, and $1,000 fine. Now, moving on to other states. In the state of Utah, another state, in fact, the first state to pioneer the cannabidiol oil laws, they are looking to expand medical marijuana research in the state. House Bill 130 passed 70-2 in the Utah House, and it's been sent to the Senate. The sponsor of the bill is Representative Brad Daw, a Republican from Orem, Utah. He argues that the states have done it backwards when it comes to medical marijuana. Usually they legalize it and then they do the research. He says his bill gets the order right, that, quote, good data makes good decisions. Let's get some good data so we can make good decisions, end quote. Well, if you get the good data, then Utah is bound to be moving forward with medical marijuana. Some of the other states involved in marijuana reform currently, the state of Arkansas. This is a terrible bill that has been filed in the state of Arkansas, House Bill 1451. You know that Arkansas just passed its medical marijuana law, no home grow, very strict conditions and so forth, a very strict medical marijuana law. This bill, HB 1451, has been drawn up to prevent members of the Arkansas National Guard from acquiring medical cannabis cards. As a former National Guardsman myself, I am appalled by this, as if our National Guard, especially those serving in Arkansas who may have done some active duty time in the theater of war out there in the Middle East, in Afghanistan, in Iraq. These people could benefit from the pain relief, from the post-traumatic stress relief that you get from medical cannabis. This bill would prevent them from doing so. In the state of New Mexico, Senate Joint Resolution 19 has been filed to allow the voters to decide on a constitutional amendment for the personal possession and use of marijuana. Full-on legalization, state of New Mexico, being proposed as a legislatively referred constitutional amendment. In the state of Hawaii, House Bill 836 has been filed. This is a bill that would allow the inter-island transportation of medicinal marijuana products. This is something that's unique to Hawaii in that trying to get medical marijuana from one island to another involves federal transport in some way. It's either going to be federal airspace, FAA jurisdiction, or it's going to be on the water, nautical jurisdiction. So a very important bill here in Hawaii to help the patients there and help the providers be able to move the marijuana from island to island. In the state of Minnesota, 2 Democratic state lawmakers will be introducing bills to legalize recreational marijuana in Minnesota. These bills aren't expected to go very far with the Republican-controlled legislature. And finally, in the state of Kansas, a Kansas lawmaker, Senator David Haley, a Democrat from Kansas City, is planning to introduce one bill for medicinal use of marijuana in Kansas, another one to legalize adult use. And again,
The bill may not make it far, but Haley's optimistic. He says the Kansas legislature has become far more moderate since the November election. All right, stay tuned when we come back. We've got Michael Krawitz on the line talking about PTSD for medical marijuana in Colorado.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Hey everybody, it's Radical Russ here from 420 Radio, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Say yes to your life. And when it comes to drugs and alcohol, just say no.
All right. You're high, too. Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they aim you to say that.
Dude,
hello?
Dude.
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show. Activism begins with ACT. The Russ Belville Show features the stories of hardworking grassroots activists working for an end to prohibition in today's activist agenda.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Today for the Activist Agenda, we are joined via Skype by Michael Krawitz, one of my favorite activists out there who is with Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. And Michael, are you hearing me okay?
I can hear you just fine, Russ.
Oh, fantastic. Glad to have you on the line. And we were talking earlier today and had such a good discussion that I wanted to bring some of this to our listeners. And most prominently, we were discussing the potential addition of post-traumatic stress as a qualifying condition for patients in the state of Colorado. And the question that comes up is, well, if marijuana is legal in Colorado, why do you need to add post-traumatic stress? Can't veterans and soldiers get what they need now under legalization?
Well, yes and no. I think that each of these strategies reaches a different population. One, number two, we have different medications, different strains, different products in the medical cannabis market, and the commercial market doesn't always love the non-commercial products that we need for vets or other patients. Maybe a niche might not be such a big patient population, big demand as to make it fit into the supply and demand regimen. And then finally, an issue that's come up recently is, what about those who are not over 21 that are suffering from post-traumatic stress? How do we deal with that? And the medications that suck for adults aren't even approved for young people.
Oh, good point. A lot of people don't recognize that we have that difference when it comes to the medical cannabis access in the state of Colorado, in that the folks that are recreational users don't get the same particular strains. They don't get the same selection as they do if they're on the medical side, correct?
Yes, there's going to be a slightly different list, and maybe a lot of vets that are able to just go in, show an ID, get cannabis over the counter, and do great, and that's fine. But our organization really likes the idea of doing this under doctor's vision for post-traumatic stress.
Now, how is that battle going there in Colorado? Does it look like it's going to make it through? Because I understand that the folks from Project Sam were there trying to spread some disinformation.
It's been a fascinating journey in Colorado. We've been fighting this for like 7 years to try to add post-traumatic stress as a qualifying condition, and it really does boggle the mind that we're still fighting so hard. And against what? I mean, what do the mostly like psychiatrists, the American Psychiatric Association, that's really led the charge over the years, really at times taking a very, very proactive stance in opposing us, blocking us, adding this qualifying condition. And it seems really out of character to because if you can already access it legally, what they're really fighting over is just the being able to use it under doctor's supervision.
Yeah, and why would that be less safe than just using it recreationally?
Well, yeah, why would they do that at all? In fact, the psychiatric community has to look at cannabis as anything other than a drug of abuse. And representing veterans, we have a pretty conservative point of view. Don't really take much problem in looking at cannabis as a plant, and certainly as an herb, but also certainly we can look through the eyes of the psychiatric community what they see when they look at it as a drug of abuse. There's a big book on their desk about cannabis as a drug of abuse. It fits into a poly drug abuse profile. People labeled substance abuse disorder for using cannabis and given medications to help them break that cycle of addiction. All that's true. We're not discounting any of that, but you weigh that against the positive medical benefit in an area where you have very little medications that are on the market actually are known to increase the risk of suicide in many cases. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it's crazy when I hear those ads for antidepressants that say may cause suicidal thoughts. That's like exactly the wrong side effect for the type of drug that we are prescribing here, don't you think?
I mean, that's the bottom line, I think, is that you need a full toolbox. Whatever it is that may help for medical condition, it might be, the cognitive behavioral therapy that they talk about, the counseling, maybe mindfulness training, Buddhist mindfulness training. They're employing that in the VAs these days. Maybe a service dog, and maybe cultivating a plant. They're looking at cultivating cannabis as an occupational therapy, and all these things seem to have a place. You can't discount one and throw it out, especially in an area so void of good pharmaceuticals as post-traumatic stress.
Now, the information that you sent to me earlier today coming out of Project Sam was pretty shocking because we've, of course, talked to many veterans on this show about their use of cannabis to treat post-traumatic stress, and they rave about it. But according to Sabet, there's some sort of study out there showing a greater degree of suicide risk for veterans who are using cannabis to treat post-traumatic stress. This is pretty new stuff, but what can you tell us about it?
This is an old game, though. It's a game where people like Kevin Sabet take some sort of piece of data and cherry pick it and put it up out of context, correlate, the correlation they turn into a causation. In other words, they try to make it sound like this is actually caused by cannabis out there in the world, when in fact they're just citing cannabis showing up. And in fact, when I showed this to our colleague Brian Crum, he was quick to point out that they're implying a result that would be very contradictory to the actual result we're seeing in our experience. The reality of it is that if you use cannabis, a lot of different circumstances, military being one of them, you're very likely to be labeled a substance person, a so-called cannabis use disorder sufferer. Been looking at those letters all day long on FDA paperwork, other paperwork. This cannabis use disorder, once labeled, puts you statistically at a higher risk of suicide. Now, what does that tell you? If I just tell you like that, you say, "Oh well, gosh, probably people out there that are trying to medicate their symptoms with cannabis. Maybe if we get them into a program where they have better access to cannabis products, might be able to do them a lot of good. Certainly don't want to target them for some sort of denial of service attack, which seems to be the implication that Kevin Sabet wants to draw.
Yeah, it's such a shame. We're speaking with Michael Krawitz. He's the director of Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. And a
Colorado is one of the states that's talking about adding post-traumatic stress. A lot of the most recent states that have adopted medical cannabis laws have added post-traumatic stress to their condition list, so that's good news. Michael's also hard at work at the international level, dealing with the UN and the various drug treaties. Do you have any updates on what's happening internationally for us?
I actually can't remember where we were at in our conversation there, Russ, but we've actually this year finally broken somewhat of a barrier in that we've got the process started at the health organization review, an internal kind of regular process review of the evidence base of the treaty. This is not an unusual thing, and especially given that process was done in 1935 that we're updating. It's way, way, way overdue. I mean, it's hard to even call it overdue. It's such an understatement. And we had been just trying to get the World Health Organization to conduct a critical review of cannabis. That would be the type of review that the expert committee on drug dependence at the World Health Organization would look at all the available evidence in a very logical and very systematic way, make recommendations based on the current evidence for changes in the treaty to make the treaty fit to the evidence and to the purpose, and make those recommendations. Then the World Health Organization would make those officially to the process of the World Drug Program, the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, who then would act on those recommendations. And that's a fight in and of itself to get the world to actually act on the recommendations. Will get another political battle. I think we're ready to fight that one. The one that we weren't really ready to fight was with the World Health Organization to get them to do the job, to just get the review. And for the last few years, that's what we've been trying to do. This year, they put on their docket next year, within the next 12 months from us talking today, they are set finally pre-review cannabis, which is the identical process as a critical review. But unless the pre-review dictates, there will be no critical review. This is it. They're finally looking at it. And this process will dictate kind of the terms of our ability to work within the process on it. If they can't get this together, if they can't update the materials based on the current evidence and get that process going, then it's a lost cause, frankly. But I have a lot of hope in the World Health Organization. They've acted with a lot of integrity in a lot of areas. There's been some places where politically they've backed down. Find a couple of reports that actually never saw the light of day, really, because of political pressure. One on cannabis, comparing cannabis with alcohol to see which one was safer. You don't want to let the results of that to get. And another one with cocaine study that compared cocaine with other substances. Well, came up with a politically undesirable outcome and it was censored. So, putting those couple of instances of censorship aside, the World Health Organization has actually been a champion of ketamine access, has fought very hard against efforts by China and others to make ketamine a controlled drug, saying that if you put ketamine on a list of controlled drugs and you schedule it, then you will make it harder for people to access and people die. Even little birds and little reptiles that need this as a medicine will die in the most horrible way. They'll die, and they're right. It's fantastic that they're championing that cause, and we have a model how maybe perfect world they'll champion our cannabis cause as well.
Michael Krawitz, you've always got such great information for us, and we'll keep checking in with you from time to time to see how things are going. And before we go, though, I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with you if they want to help support your mission or learn more about the issues we've talked about.
The best place to reach us, Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, on Facebook. Ironically, it's easy to find the Facebook page through Google, I think. Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, and we update that routinely with things that we're doing around the country. We're working hard in Colorado. We're going to continue to follow this bill through the Senate side now. You have a senator that is backing it who's a medical doctor, and a great House side representative as well that are really working hard to get this through. And if you're in Colorado, you'll definitely follow our updates, and we'll see you around.
All right. Well, Michael, thanks so much for calling in today, and good luck with everything you're doing. We wish the best to you.
Thanks, Russ.
All right. Take it easy, folks, and we'll be right back with time for the Radical Rant. We are going to go off today on the idea of Donald Trump and his recent remarks to some sheriffs that prove he is the old school drug warrior I thought he was. Be right back. Stay tuned.
This is the Russ Belville Show on cannabisradio.com.
Or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate the instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
I do support the use of medical marijuana, and I think even there we need to do a lot more research.
Okay, well, maybe you're high too.
At midnight, July 1st, 2015, adult marijuana prohibition came to an end in Oregon. Immediately, over 400,000 adults who consume cannabis responsibly were no longer criminals. This is what freedom sounds like. Brought to you by Portland Normal.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show. Encourage people to use less drugs.
I am ill. That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
Time for the radical rant. Jumping the gun. I'm so excited about this one. And it comes to us by way of a transcript that I found of the talk that President Trump had recently with some county sheriffs. Now, most of the news outlets that are reporting on this have reported on his joke that he made, where he said he would destroy the career of a Texas state senator with whom he disagrees on immigration policy. What was less reported was the remark that led to Mr. Trump's joke, and that was that this particular state senator was attempting to undermine civil asset forfeiture. That's that drug war tactic where the police take people's cash and their possessions on the suspicion, but not the proof, just the suspicion that they were gained through criminal drug activity. And in the discussion, Mr. Trump seems incredulous that we might want to ensure someone's guilty before taking their stuff. Here's from the transcript. The participant says, Mr. President, on asset forfeiture, we got a state senator in Texas who is talking about introducing legislation to require conviction before we can receive their forfeiture. The president replies, can you believe that? The participant says, and I told him that the cartel would build a monument to him in Mexico if he could get that legislation. Who is that state senator? Want to give his name? We'll destroy his career. Okay, thank you. That was the destroy the career remark the president made, but it was because this state senator wanted to require people get convicted before we take their stuff. Now, many of these articles that I've been writing lately have talked about how under the Trump administration, I predict we are going to return to previous levels of drug war law enforcement. And a lot of my readers are disagreeing with me. They say, oh, Donald Trump, he's for states' rights. So he's 100% for medical marijuana, he said. And he's a businessman. He's all about money and entrepreneurship. And marijuana's too popular and the marijuana industry is too big and so forth. Well, I talked about this yesterday. I'm no expert on the presidency, but John Hudak from the Brookings Institute is. And last weekend at the Virginia Cannabis Conference, he explained how you're insane if you think the marijuana industry is too big and too popular to be a target of Republican wrath. He pointed out how if what was popular set what the policy agenda was, we'd have, quote, comprehensive immigration reform and universal background checks for guns. That 62 or 63% of the Americans support legalization means nothing to the President of the United States. And as far as us being too big to attack, Hudak says, quote, your industry is small by any metric of American capitalism. You are a speck of dust in a clutter of dirt of American capitalism. The president is planning to repeal the Affordable Care Act. If you think that hospitals, doctors, and the pharmaceutical industry are small enough to be shaken down by the president, but the cannabis industry is too big to face the same challenge from the president, once again, you're insane. Well, now as I read more of this transcript to you, based on the president's talk with these sheriffs, I'm more convinced than ever that a drug war reboot is coming soon. In Mr. Trump's opening remarks to the sheriffs, he mentioned, without naming it, the expansion of providing naloxone, that's the opioid overdose cure, to law enforcement. But then he jumps right to hyping the supposed link between Mexican drugs and American crime. This is from the president. I just want you to let you know that our job is to help you in law enforcement, and we're going to help you do your job. We're going to expand access to abuse-deterring drugs, which a lot of you have been talking about. They're out, and they're hard to get. Stop the opioid epidemic. We've got to do it. It's a new thing. And honestly, people aren't talking about it enough. It's a new thing, and it's a new problem for you folks. It's probably a vast majority of your crimes, or at least a very big portion of your crimes, are caused by drugs. Of course, Mr. Trump is using alternative facts when he claims that a vast majority or a very big portion of crimes are caused by drugs. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, quote, in 2004, 17% of state prisoners and 18% of federal inmates said they committed their current offense to obtain money for drugs, end quote. So that's not a vast majority or a very big portion. So is he referring to that, or is he referring to the crime of possessing the drugs themselves, as well as the actual crimes that drug users commit? Well, that doesn't represent a very big portion or vast majority of all arrests either. According to the FBI's Uniform Crime Report for 2015, there were 10.8 million arrests in America, and only 1.5 million of those were for drug abuse violations. So maybe he's adopting the talking points of the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence, which claims, quote, alcohol and drugs are implicated in an estimated 80% of offenses leading to incarceration in the United States, end quote. Now, the only problem for that is if you go with that, you've got to adopt their position that, quote, alcohol is a factor in 40% of all violent crimes today, and, quote, about 3 million violent crimes occur each year in which victims perceive the offender to have been drinking, and, quote, half of all homicides and assaults are committed when the offender, victim, or both have been drinking, end quote. The National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence goes on to say that, quote, among violent crimes, with the exception of robberies, the offender is far more likely to have been drinking than under the influence of other drugs, end quote. And when it comes to other drugs and crime, quote, many illegal drug users commit no other kinds of crimes, and many persons who commit crimes never use illegal drugs, end quote. Let's go back to the remarks by the president, because he continued to talk about the scourge of drugs. This is Donald Trump. We're going to have to stop the border. We're not going to have the drugs pouring from the border like they've been. We will work with you in supporting your long-standing efforts to strengthen the bonds between the communities and the police, which is very important. And it's
sort of a new phenomenon to a certain extent. It's happening more and more. And some great results out when you can strengthen the bonds. We're committed to securing our borders to reduce crime, illegal drugs, human trafficking, especially in the border counties. We have a lot of border counties represented. So listen closely when he says the drugs are pouring from the border, because according to the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol in 2009, they seized over 2,000 pounds of heroin, 6,000 pounds of meth, 135,000 pounds of cocaine, and a whopping 4.3 million pounds of marijuana. So, drugs pouring over the border, it's mostly cannabis. President Trump said, so we're going to be very tough on crime. We're going to be very tough on the drugs pouring in, and that's a big part of the crime. We're not playing games. We're stopping the drugs from pouring into our country and poisoning our youth. Tough on crime. Well, getting tough on crime is how this drug war started in the first place. Back in 2012, The Atlantic published a piece explaining just how President Richard Nixon turned compassion for the addicted into contempt for the criminal. This is from The Atlantic. Quote, shifting the conversation away from eradicating the causes of crime and focusing solely on punishing the criminal, the law and order president was able to do two things. First, Nixon exonerated the white middle class from responsibility for the drug-related violence ravaging the inner cities. Second, he transformed the public image of the drug user into one of a dangerous and anarchic threat to American civilization. Shifting public perception in this way ultimately served to reinforce the necessity of Nixon's drug war. Once addicts were no longer seen as sick victims of a society that systematically excluded them, no one would mind when they were being locked up. In fact, incarceration was for the nation's own good. End quote. Here's some more from the transcript of the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump, sounding a hell of a lot like the 37th President, Richard Nixon. The president is talking to Sheriff Mahoney. How much of your crime is caused, do you think, by the drugs generally? 80%. 80%. So without the drugs, you would have a whole different ballgame. I have a jail over 1,000 beds. 80% suffer from chronic drug and alcohol addiction. Another participant pipes up, Mr. President, I hate to interrupt. It used to take 90 days to take a load of heroin from the border to get it into the country. Now it's taking 14 days. President responds, okay, well, we'll have it take infinity, okay? And then there's some laughter. Mr. Trump also signaled again that the push to end the abuse of civil asset forfeiture is over and will be returning to swiping innocent people's stuff to enrich police departments. This is a discussion between some participants, a sheriff, and Mr. Bonte, Dana Bonte, one of the president's advisors. Mr. Bonte begins by saying, I'm aware of that, Mr. President, and we have gotten a great deal of criticism for the asset forfeiture, which, as the sheriff said, frequently was taking narcotics proceeds and other proceeds of crime. But there's been a lot of pressure on the department to curtail some of that. Trump responds, so what do? In other words, they have a huge stash of drugs. So in the old days, you take it. Now we're criticized if we take it. So who gets it? What happens to it? Tell them to keep it? Bonte. Well, we have what is called equitable sharing, where we usually share it with the local police departments for whatever portion that they worked on the case. And it was a very successful program, very popular with the law enforcement community. And now what happens? Well, now we're just been given, there's been a lot of pressure not to forfeit in some cases. Who would want that pressure other than like bad people, right? But who would want that pressure? You would think that they'd want this stuff taken away. Sheriff Aubrey kicks in. You have to be careful how you speak, I guess, but a lot of pressure was coming out of Congress. I don't know that will continue now or not. Trump responds, I think less so. I think Congress is going to get it beat up badly by the voters because they've let this happen. And I think badly. I think you'll be back in shape. So asset forfeiture, we're going to be back on, okay? Thank you, sir. I mean, how simple can anything be? You all agree with that, I assume, right? Absolutely, yeah. Do you even understand the other side of it? No. You shouldn't be allowed to profit from the illegal proceeds. So if you're going to sell narcotics and sell illegal drugs in our country, you also cannot profit from that. And so we seize the profits. So do we need any legislation or any executive orders for that, would you say, Dana, to put that back in business? Bonte responds, I don't think we need any executive orders. We just need some kind of encouragement to move in that direction. Trump responds, okay, good. You're in charge. I love that answer because it's better than signing executive orders and then these people take it and then they make it look so terrible. Oh, it's so terrible. I love it. You're encouraged. Thank you. Good. Asset forfeiture? You're encouraged. Okay. Yes, sir. So if I may paraphrase John J. Hudak, if you think that following the confirmation of Senator Jeff Good People Don't Smoke Marijuana Sessions as Attorney General that a return to the drug war isn't happening, you're insane. You can check out that entire article on weednews.co if you want to get all those quotations on asset forfeiture and getting tough on drugs from President Trump. We're going to follow up on the Jeff Sessions nomination, see where they're at right now in the U.S. Senate. Coming up in hour 2, a terrible story about a hamster on acid. That's right, a hamster on acid, and how the British media is reporting on it. For everyone here at Delta 9 Studios in beautiful legal Potland, Oregon, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for hour 2, and until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
Name something that gets passed around.
A joint.
A joint.
Legalized marijuana is always a very difficult question.
The time is long overdue for us to remove the federal prohibition on marijuana.
From now on, I smoke weed exclusively with white people.
Well, I'm getting high next time.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man, the Snoopy Poop Dog.
There's definitely cannabis in there, and it makes sure that I can sleep now.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Don't piss off your old dealer.
Marijuana is not the kind of thing that ought to be legalized.
I know you're not supposed to admit that you smoke pot, but I don't drink alcohol.
Let's get out of here. I have some really good weed back at the hotel.
I used to smoke marijuana.
I don't care if an adult wants to smoke marijuana. They shouldn't go to prison for it either.
All right, welcome everybody. Hour 2, in effect, Toker Talk Radio. I'm taking a look at the chat room. Chat room over on Cannabis Radio. Reverend Richard wants to know, how do we stop these people that are doing these terrible things? Well, you get organized. You join NORML, you join SSDP, you join LEAP, you join ASA, you join whatever group you can. You form a group. You call your state representatives. You call your federal representatives. You go to their offices. You lobby. You rally. You protest. You sign petitions. I mean, it's a lot of things you can do. A lot of things you can do. But as we move on to this hour 2, we got some great stuff coming up. We're going to take a look at our voicemails that have built up while I was off the air. We got a great one from Brooklyn to play for you. Also coming up on the show, we've got some data from Ease, the delivery service for marijuana in California. They've got some data on their user base that is quite interesting. And we'll take a look at New York and how Governor Cuomo is coming out against legalization. We'll wrap things up today by going down under to New Zealand, where a woman is fighting a battle to try to get access to medical cannabis. But for this segment, real quick, I wanted to talk about a story that is in the in the news. I saw this come across BBC News, and the headline was, hamster fed LSD spiked Tizer and cannabis in Haysham. Now, Tizer is like a soft drink. Okay, so Coke, right? Hamster fed LSD spiked soft drink and cannabis. So what it was is these guys that they uploaded this video where they had fed, the guy's name is Chinimuya Natembe, age 22. He put some LSD in the soft drink, put it in the hamster's water bottle, and gave the hamster some marijuana leaves to chew on. The hamster was named Mr. Chow, by the way. And then they filmed the hamster freaking out and tripping on the acid, right? Now, I'm totally against this. You shouldn't dose your animals. They do not have the agency to decide to take drugs, and they don't have the consciousness to understand what the hell's going on. It's cruel. You shouldn't do it. But this isn't about the dosing of the hamster. This is about how the British media reported on it, because the BBC headline, hamster fed LSD spiked Tizer and cannabis in Heysham. Perfectly legit headline. 4 other popular outlets in the UK decided that talking about the hamster wasn't enough. We had to implicate the race of the people or the person who victimized the hamster. In the Telegraph UK, the headline was, "He's going nuts. Hamster survives after thugs feed it LSD." In the Express UK, headline, "Shocking moment. Animal thug pours LSD into hamster's water bottle." The Evening Standard, "Cruel thug who fed hamster cannabis and Tizer laced with LSD jailed." And finally, the Daily Mail, "Thugs feed a pet hamster Tizer laced with LSD and a cannabis leaf as they filmed its reactions in a shocking video." Now, you probably don't have to guess what color the guy was who fed the hamster LSD after those 4 headlines, do you? For the BBC headline, it was the cruelty being inflicted upon the hamster. That somebody fed this hamster LSD. That was a bad thing. The other 4 had to shoehorn the word thug in there. And of course, Natembe, the 22-year-old in the story, is black. I hesitate to even consider what the chances are that 4 different news outlets would have put the word thug in there if the perpetrator was white. If this was a white kid that had fed his hamster some LSD. It's these little things in the media you got to pay attention to. You got to be listening for. At this point now, they're not even dog whistles to me. They're just like foghorns. They're so loud I can see them every single time. There was no journalistic reason to indicate who the victimizers were, other than to say a young man. Young man in Heysham spikes the hamster's water. But now they went right to thug, didn't they? Went right to thug. It's just disgusting to me. I was going to talk more about the animal cruelty side of it, really. When I first saw the story, I was going to, go off on a rant here on, don't dose your animals, man. But then I saw the other headlines. I went, oh, wait a minute. Hold on now. That's some bullshit. All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we got plenty more for you here on Toker Talk Radio, including some of our voicemails at our studio line, 650-LEGAL-MJ. You can call that line 24 hours a day and leave a message if you like. We might play it back on the air. Back after this.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
In the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Russ Belville Show presents the anti-drug public service announcement of the day.
Boys! Folks, I hate to interrupt you when you need it, but you done spilled the soap.
This isn't normal. But on meth, it is.
This has been the Russ Belville Show's anti-drug public service announcement of the day, exclusively on RadicalRuss.com.
When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email fireduplawyer@gmail.com.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Okay, well, maybe you're high, too. Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that.
Yeah.
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show. Pod 2.0. It's not your father's Woodstock weed. This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everyone. 9 after the hour, and checking back into the chat rooms over the break, and some discussion over the word thug. Some older folks are like, thug's not necessarily racist, right? I mean, you remember back watching the old Dick Tracy cartoons, and they would go after those thugs, right? A thug was just a criminal. It was just a ne'er-do-well, a scoundrel, right? A goon, a henchman, right? No doubt about it, that's what the word used to mean. Used to mean that. But it's a word that's evolved, folks, and we can't play ignorant and think, oh, I didn't mean anything when I said thug. No, folks, thug now is a racist dog whistle. Thug now conjures something different than it used to in the 50s, okay? So accept that language evolves, and when people are using the word thug in this context, we know exactly what it means. Now, if I could be wrong, and I'm willing to be proven wrong, here's how you could prove me wrong. Go out to Google News, news.google.com. Put in the word thug, and peruse the results you get back. And tell me how many of those thugs in the stories are white. If you can show me that we've got, what was there, about 12% black population in America? 12 is pretty close, right? If you can show me that only 1 out of 8 thugs in the stories you get back from Google News is black, then I will retract my opinion on the word thug. All right, let me get to another story that was quite interesting to me. Oh, and by the way, phone lines are open at 650. I almost did it again. 650 legal MJ. If you want to talk about that, you got any opinions on the matter, be glad to discuss it further. But I did want to talk about this story that came out of Business Insider on the marijuana delivery service Eaze, E-A-Z-E. And, it's been called the Uber for weed. You have a little app, and then you order up your weed, and somebody drives it over to you. So on February 8th, they released their State of Cannabis report, which was about consumer demographics and other trends that they can point out from their data. Now, we've got a call coming in. Let's instead go to that phone call and see if we can get our caller on the line. Welcome to Toker Talk Radio. You're on the air. Oh, my goodness. He probably can't hear me. Got to switch that over to there. Hello? Now maybe you can hear me. Are you there?
Yes.
Oh, hello, caller. What's on your mind?
Oh, I was just talking about the subject. You were talking about what the word thug means.
Sure, yeah.
Well, I was just saying, at least down here in Texas, it can mean like a lot of things. Usually it seems like it's big in the hip-hop culture, so I was just kind of intrigued about the whole conversation. And it seems like a lot of people nowadays are using it more so, like, I guess, kind of like how people use the slang term dog. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I get your point. Like, I've been looking at this from the side of the media and, you know, white culture using thug in a derogatory sense, where in hip hop culture, I mean, you see like, you know, Tupac had the thug life, you know, tattoo.
Yeah,
and he's like, yo, my dog, yo, thug, what's up? That kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I was actually just curious myself to what you thought about it, because that really intrigued me.
It does. It seems it's like it's almost like the use of the term gangsta, right? Like
exactly.
The original gangster was, you know, the Al Capone days with the Tommy guns. Those were gangsters, and you know, maybe going up into the
gangsters or the crime life. But now I've even heard like some women say like, oh, I mean, this might sound funny, but like in slang, like, oh, I want a thug. I want that kind of guy in my life.
Yeah, bad boy.
I mean? Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. I think in a sense, though, this kind of bolsters my point about how the media using that term is using it to try to evoke that racial stereotype.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I mean, I hate to say it, but with Trump in office now, I mean, I feel like it's going to be pushed. I mean, that's the truth. I feel like it's going to be pushed, you know, more, oh, these thugs and this and that and then that.
Yeah,
So
I think you're going to hear a
crazy.
lot more scapegoating in that respect, and a whole lot less of the idea that we need to reform and rehabilitate people. A lot less of the idea that people with drug problems deserve compassion. You know, more lock them up, throw away the key.
Exactly. Instead of saying, hey, you know, whether it be marijuana or something else, these people need medicine, or if they have a problem, we need to help find the problem, not throw them, you know, in jail or something.
Yeah, this is the sad thing, is that over the past 8 years or so during the Obama administration, there's been kind of this revolution of thinking on the progressive side with respect to drug addiction, in that getting away from that disease model and more into the model of it's a dysfunction, it's a social dysfunction, right? Like people who have good social lives and a lot of support, they don't get addicted like people who are lonely and depressed and so forth. And just as we're making that change, boom, here comes Trump. We're gonna go right back.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the scary thing to me is just like, are we gonna go backwards, or are we gonna keep moving forward? You know?
Yeah.
That's the scary part to me.
Yeah. Man, I appreciate you calling in. That's some good stuff to talk about. And thanks for watching the show. Make sure to tell other people to tune into RadicalRuss.com.
Yes, sir, I will. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Texas. Appreciate it very much. Phone lines open, 650-LEGAL-MJ if you're interested in talking. And let's take this time to go back to our voicemail, because while I was off the air, we had some voicemail calls at 650-LEGAL-MJ from people. And a longtime listener, a fellow by the name of Wayne, had called me, and he had some things to say about Jeff Sessions. Let's give it a listen.
Russ, it's Wayne Reese from Brooklyn calling you. I can never remember, since I'm on the other coast, what the right time is to call. You know, I have mad love for you, Russ, and I'm calling to hear what your reaction is to the Jeff Sessions hearings. I had two thoughts. The thing that I found what I wanted to hear is from you is what you thought was most alarming out of the whole interview, the whole hearing. What that he said, that he divulged, did you find most shocking, most appalling? Here's my nomination for the most appalling thing. When he defended the Japanese internment camps in America during World War II, after World War II, the internment of not foreign enemies, but of American citizens, many of whom fought in the war. And his response was telling. First he said, we arrested German war criminals without trial, and Feinstein grilled him and said, I'm talking about American citizens. And then his response was, well, I respectfully disagree with you. That in times of war, you know, we can essentially shred the Constitution, get rid of habeas corpus, and definitely imprison American citizens without a charge, without a trial. this is going to be our Attorney General. And then that in combination with the fact that in the past, although he knew better to say it during the hearings, in the past, he has approved of lists, government lists, that take away the rights of people based on their religion. Wow. That I nominate for the most shocking thing he said. Then the second shocking thing didn't happen during the interrogation, the hearing, was I urge your fans to watch Democracy Now! Amy Goodman is doing some fantastic coverage of Jeff Sessions. She interviewed just a couple of days ago, maybe yesterday or 2 days ago, two ACLU lawyers who both said that the ACLU does not take a position on
well, that's where it cuts off, unfortunately, folks. But there's Wayne calling in from Brooklyn with his thoughts on Jeff Sessions. And yeah, that's pretty embarrassing that Jeff Sessions supported or spoke out in favor, or Governor LePage spoke out in favor of the Japanese internment camps, and Sessions being one of those guys as well. Excuse my distraction a little bit here. The Sessions vote is happening now on the Senate floor. I'm trying to bring this up for you. We'll give a listen on the Senate floor as soon as they're available. Looks like they're still taking the roll call, so it might be a little bit before we get the actual result, but we'll keep that on the screen. Just
Ms. Murkowski, aye.
Lisa Murkowski voting aye in favor of the confirmation of Jeff Sessions, Senator Sessions.
This is bullshit.
Russ Belville Show is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association in the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com, and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit mjba.net for more details.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
I drank beer heavily and tried drugs enthusiastically.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere. Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that.
Oh, I could have smoked that pot.
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show. Pod 2.0. It's not your father's Woodstock weed. This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
Welcome back, everyone. 22 after the hour. We are continuing to focus on the Attorney General Sessions nomination. Discussions are going on. The vote is happening now on the floor of the United States Senate. We've got the video up on our YouTube screen at RadicalRuss.com. We don't know yet where the votes are. I'm trying to get more information for you on that front. And boom, we just crashed the browser. Okay. You can tell I'm really putting the computer through its paces, aren't I? The browser just died on us, so we'll see if we can get that back up for you. There we go. All right, let's see. The Jeff Sessions nomination, of course, for Attorney General could be a terrible, terrible result for those of us here in the marijuana industry. Let's see. Jeff Sessions confirmed as Attorney General after contentious day of debate. It's official, folks. We can say that we now have a new Attorney General. It is Jeff Sessions. Yeah. According to CNBC, Jeff Sessions has been confirmed as Attorney General. Try and find more backup on this, get you some more details, see if we can find out what the vote actually was for confirmation on Attorney General Sessions. We did hear Lisa Murkowski voting in favor of the Sessions confirmation, and I am looking right now to see if we can get the vote totals for you. The Sessions confirmed, let's see, ACLU has confirmed that Jeff Sessions has been confirmed. It does not say who or how or why. Again, no more data than that at this point. But it has been confirmed by ACLU. Fox News is confirming this as well through their Twitter account. Let's see. Breaking news appears to have the votes to be confirmed. So, boy, it's a sad day today for the marijuana industry, for criminal justice in general, with the confirmation of Jeff Sessions, who, of course, said good people don't smoke marijuana, and the federal government needs to make a serious message about this. We will continue to focus on this throughout the rest of the week, and I think we won't have to wait long, folks. I don't think it's going to be very long to wait to see what Jeff Sessions has in store for us in the cannabis community. I imagine, letters going out almost immediately to the attorneys general in the various states with the confirmation legalized of Jeff Sessions, who, of course, I'm looping myself. Sorry about that, folks. But I really do think that we've got some bad news on the horizon here with the confirmation of Jeff Sessions. And the first thing I anticipate happening are the letters going out to the states to tell them that any state official who would sign their name on a license for state legal marijuana commerce would be in violation of federal law and the Controlled Substances Act. It was that sort of threat that kept the state of Washington from moving forward with any sort of a medical marijuana dispensary system when they had the shot to do so back in 2011. She line item vetoed all that stuff for fear that the state workers would end up suffering, would end up getting busted by the federal government. That type of letter, that type of warning from Jeff Sessions could have a terribly chilling effect on the marijuana industry. And that wouldn't cost very much in terms of political capital or in terms of resources in any way to have to put out that sort of message to the states. And that's why it's just so frustrating for so many people to have been saying recently that there's nothing to worry about. It'll be fine. President Trump's all about states' rights. You don't have to worry. It's going to be okay. And folks, I just don't think that's the case. I think we're in for a real slog here. It's going to be real difficult over the next 4 years dealing with this administration, dealing with this attorney general who hates our position, absolutely thinks that we're disgusting human beings. This is about canna bigotry in addition to his actual bigotry, which cannot be underestimated either. There are some people, I think, especially the younger millennials who are involved in the marijuana industry, who have no personal experience with how irrational, how capricious, and how vindictive the federal government can be when it comes to enforcing marijuana laws. And I think there's my interpretation of what happened in this 2016 election was, in a sense, it was almost like the old white patriarchy slapped us down for getting uppity over the past 8 years. We got all uppity and elected a black man and legalized pot and started getting people health insurance. And the response now from the establishment, from the status quo, from the patriarchy here, is to slap us down, put us back in our place, make sure we know where we belong. And I think a big part of that is going to be slapping down marijuana. We saw the op-ed, and I mentioned this yesterday, the op-ed from John P. Walters, the former drug czar under President Bush, who I am thinking is getting heard in the Trump administration. I think he's got the ear of the Trump administration. And we saw his remarks where he talked about how the reason, in his mind, the reason why we've seen this increase in marijuana use and this increase in marijuana support up to 60% in the Gallup polls, he believes is because the government wasn't sending a strong enough message about how bad marijuana is. Now, it's bullshit. We know why people's support for marijuana has increased. It's because we've legalized medical marijuana in a lot of states. People have seen it with their own two eyes. They've known people who've used it medically. Now we've legalized it in some states, and people have experienced that. They've seen the sky didn't fall. The reason why the public support is going up for marijuana legalization is because people are finally becoming aware of the truth about cannabis. Not because the government hasn't been lying hard enough about it. Okay? These are two different things. The absence of the government jumping in with their typical reefer madness propaganda has allowed the truth about cannabis to flourish. But by no means did the Obama administration cheerlead for legalization. Now, the best they could do was to stand aside and let the states take it. But if the federal government, under the direction of Donald Trump and Attorney General Sessions, and by the way, Sessions is supposed to be like one of the linchpins in the whole Steve Bannon right-wing takeover thing. They really, really, really wanted to have Sessions. Okay? That if there's a renewed federal interest under Sessions and Trump to propagandize and demonize and attack and infiltrate and obstruct, they could do a lot of damage to the cannabis industry. And it's interesting to me how the observers of the marijuana reform movement tend to divide up into two camps. The it's going to be okay camp. We can work with them camp, right? It's okay. We can work with them. It's going to be okay. And then my camp, the hair on fire, holy shit, here comes the drug war again camp. Now, interestingly, the folks in the former camp tend to be the ones that are on the money side of things. They tend to be the ones that own the big companies, and they own the investment hedge funds and the angel investor networks and the big dispensaries and grows. So are they just optimistic? Are they just optimistic? Are they seeing the world through rose-colored glasses because of how good the green rush has been to them? Or are they being opportunistic in telling people what they want to hear so that the money keeps flowing into the investment coffers before the big crash happens? In other words, is the optimism for what may happen under a Trump administration really just a form of a pump and dump? Pump up the value of this industry before it comes crashing down. I tend to think that. Because to me, it's interesting how the people in my camp are all the longtime medical marijuana activists and marijuana reformers. Those of us who've been raided, been locked up, been attacked, had our businesses and our kids and our freedom taken from us. Those of us who really aren't making a whole lot of money on the green rush, despite whatever rumors you might have heard about me. I heard a rumor the other day that I bring in like $250,000 a year. I don't know. I brought in $250,000 in my life, folks. But that's the two camps. And I really think, of course, since I'm in that camp, the hair on fire camp, I really think that we are in for some tough times. And this is going to test the mettle of a lot of activists out there. A lot of people who've jumped on the green rush bandwagon. It's going to be interesting to see how many of them jump off of it once indictments start flowing. Once we start seeing propaganda coming back from the White House on how terribly awful weed is and how bad drug users are. How many of them who've been making big bucks off of us marijuana users are going to stick by us when things get tough? How many of them instead are going to take their profits and run and then just go invest in whatever the next thing is? These next 4 years are going to separate the wheat from the chaff. They are going to definitely show us who's in this for the reform aspect of it and who's in it just for the money. We're going to find that out real quick. President Trump's going to help separate a lot of these bandwagoneers out of the green rush. I can tell you that right off the bat. So Jeff Sessions will be our next Attorney General. And don't look for just Sessions to attack a culture war in drugs, folks. I don't like the prospects of women's right to choose, or contraceptive coverage in insurance, or the rights of the transgender to be paid much attention to under a Sessions Department of Justice. I expect a brand new war on obscenity. We're gonna have federal obscenity charges. Mark my words. You just watch. We're gonna see the federal government going after pornography again. That's the kind of mentality that's making its way into our Department of Justice with the confirmation of Senator Sessions. And now it's been revealed that Betsy DeVos, of course, she got confirmed as Education Secretary, despite never going to a public school, never putting her kids into a public school, hating public school, wanting to abolish public school. She basically used her Amway money, her big fortune, to buy her way into a cabinet seat. The most unqualified education secretary. But then again, that pretty much goes with having the most unqualified energy secretary in Rick Perry, a guy who got a D in a class called Meats. He follows the past 3 energy secretaries who were dual PhDs in nuclear physics and math. Oh, it's going to be an interesting 4 years, folks. I'm sure glad weed is legal here in Oregon because I'm going to have to smoke a whole hell of a lot of it to get through this. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Governor Cuomo and a little news from New Zealand. Stay tuned.
This is the Russ Belville Show on CannabisRadio.com.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Russ Belville Show and 420 Radio.
You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
But I think it is the prerogative of the states to make that determination. I think the people of Colorado have the right to make the decision that they've made under the Constitution.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere. Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that.
It's no bong. It's for my schlong.
A public service message from the Russ Belville Show. Warning. Hits taken on this show are larger than they appear. Do not try this at home. These people are professionals. Or at least they pay me to say that. This is Dan Michaels from danmichaelsaudio.com, and you're listening to Radical Russ on cannabisradio.com.
All right, welcome back. And we were going to discuss a little bit about the findings of that California data from Ease. Ease is it's basically the Uber for weed. people call them up and then they'll bring you some weed. But my browser crashed, so I'm having to find where that particular story was, and I think I'm getting close, but looking through the history while I'm talking to you can be kind of difficult, but it is in here somewhere. Well, I can tell you some of the basics of it. In what they found is that the people using the delivery service were 2-to-1 male, 2 guys for every woman, and that makes sense to me based on some of the surveys we've seen in the past. When the National Survey on Drug Use and Health asks people about their marijuana use, the more you use marijuana, the more likely you are to be male. If you look at people, just the have you ever smoked weed in your life demographic, the lifetime users, it's like 55-45-ish, right? It's pretty close. It's still more male dominant, but generally even as far as people who've tried marijuana in their life. And then you get it down to the annual users, and it gets more male, and then the monthly users gets more male, and then the weekly users, and then finally, by the time you get to the people who are daily pot smokers, 68% of us are male, 32% female. So again, a 2-to-1 ratio of daily pot smokers of males to females. So the demographic that's going to use a weed delivery service suggests to me they would be more likely to be frequent users of cannabis, and if that's the case, they're more likely to be male. So that's not too surprising a finding. They found that the sales of flower are down, but the sales of vaporizers are up. In fact, a 400% increase in the sales of vaporized products. And more CBD products are popular these days as well. And to me, the best finding out of this story had to do with the self-reported alcohol use of the people using the Ease service. They found that 82% of the people using Ease had reduced their alcohol intake since they had gotten access to marijuana. Over 4 out of 5 have reduced how much alcohol they drink thanks to their access to marijuana. And about 1 out of 10 of them, I think it was like 10 or 11%, gave up booze entirely, quit drinking entirely, thanks to their access to marijuana. When you read the figures like this, when you hear these numbers, it gives you pause. It gives you reason to understand why there's so much opposition to the legalization of marijuana. We already know that it's a competition for the pharmaceutical industry. You can grow your own sleep aid in your backyard. You don't need to buy Ambien. Grow your own pain reliever in your closet. You don't need to buy Tylenol. Right? All these different things that cannabis can help alleviate. And to me, it's not even the fact that cannabis can, help people with seizures or HIV/AIDS or anything like that. The real serious medical uses, right? Because as important as those are, it's not a huge market. It's not a huge demographic, right? Not a ton of people that have AIDS, thankfully, right? But when you start talking about replacing the thing that people take for their average day-to-day headache, when we're talking, super majorities of people that take aspirin or Tylenol or whatever, Advil, people that take the sleeping pills like Ambien and Lunesta, that's a big market. And you start talking about undercutting those markets, that's where they have the problem with medical marijuana. And more seriously, they have the problem with recreational legalization. Some of them can deal with medical marijuana. For some of them, it's like, well, if you got cancer, we can let you smoke a joint. And besides, the law makes it so you have to try everything else first, right? You see that in a lot of these medical cannabis laws, where they say you have to exhaust every other option. All right, if you've tried the surgeries and you've tried all the possible drugs and none of them worked, then we'll let you have your medical cannabis. Well, why do they do that, right? Like, medical cannabis is non-toxic, right? It's not going to hurt anybody. Well, no, they do that to make sure that the pharmaceutical companies still get their kick, still get their fix. They still get their money. if people started with the medical marijuana, they'd never use the pills and never go to the surgeries. And, well, that would be bad for business, wouldn't it? But they can at least accept some medical marijuana because there's some roadblocks. And really only the most seriously ill people are going to get it, especially in these East Coast states. And it would look bad for them to be in opposition to, you know, cancer patients and AIDS patients and epileptics, you know, so it'd be bad PR. But when it comes to the average person with a headache or an achy knee or a little indigestion or can't sleep a little, that's where recreational pot comes in. That's where recreational pot gives the average person the same over-the-counter option they would have with aspirin or Pepto-Bismol or Ambien. I guess Ambien's not over-the-counter, is it? What's the over-the-counter sleep aid thing? Name one. You get my drift, though? That's why we see such opposition to this. It has a lot to do with these entrenched interests that would suffer severely. I mean, already we are seeing 5 to 10% lower beer sales volumes in Colorado, Oregon, and Washington. And Colorado, Oregon, and Washington like their beer. It's not like we're anti-beer out here. We got more craft breweries than almost any place in the world. But even among the craft brews, the use is down because, as this ease data pointed out, people with access to marijuana use less alcohol. And that's the big battle that's coming in this whole legalization thing, is the final showdown between the alcohol industry and the emerging marijuana industry. And that goes back to that point about the cannabis industry is so big, oh, no one's going to tackle it. Look, in 1919, there were 1,300 operating breweries in the United States. In 1919, most of the states got a majority of their tax revenue from alcohol excise taxes. And yet, all the states ratified prohibition. All the states looked at their tax revenue and said, yeah, we'd be willing to lose that to ban booze. All those states that had all those voters who worked in all those breweries that paid all that tax money, they were willing to look at that and go, nope, that's not important. We need to save the children. We can't have the children being exposed to the dangers of alcohol.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
So don't think that the marijuana industry is too big to tackle. I mean, $6 billion is nothing compared to the worth of some of these alcohol companies. What is the net worth? What is the profit of one of the big alcohol companies? Like let's say InBev. InBev is the former Anheuser-Busch, right? What is their net profit? According to InBev's net profit here, Anheuser-Busch InBev, Google tells me that their total assets are $134.6 billion. Their profit was $8.27 billion. One alcohol company's profit is bigger than the entire marijuana industry. And that's not the marijuana industry's profit. That's the marijuana industry's size is $6 billion, right? Their profit is bigger than our whole industry is. And it's those people that come back and they say, oh, you know, well, Trump's all about business and he hangs out with the guys on the Fortune 500. Yeah, sure does. He hangs out with the heads of InBev and Miller Coors and all these other pharmaceutical and alcohol companies. Think he's hanging out with Troy Dayton and Steve D'Angelo? So it's going to be tough. And understand that I'll be here. I lived through Reagan. I lived through W, man. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to continue to fight this. But understand that I'll be the guy that'll be telling you I told you so, because I have told you so. It's going to get bad. And I told a whole lot of marijuana reformers who could not countenance the idea of voting for Hillary Clinton, that you're going to, in a year, wish that you had voted for someone that could have beaten Donald Trump, because it's going to get bad, folks. And I got a lot of friends in this industry. I got a lot of friends who have companies and grows, and I really don't want to see them having to pull up stakes and sell their stuff and move and have to deal with all the fallout that's going to happen, but I think it's going to happen. All we can do is continue to talk to our senators and our representatives, continue to organize, join our local normal chapters, march, protest, do everything we can to get it across that we're not just going to sit by and let this happen. We fought long and hard for these rights. We got to fight harder to keep them. And boy, I'm having so much fun with the computer today. It's just locked up on me for a second. All right, let's try that again. I don't know what's going on with the machine today, but it is not behaving the way I want it to. There it goes. We'll be right back after this.
You're not high. You're listening to the Russ Belville Show.
And the crime, and the gangs, and the drugs. This American carnage stops right now.
All right. Well, maybe you're high, too.
All right. Machine is definitely locking up on me. I'm trying my best, folks. I don't know why the automator is misbehaving, but that seems to be what's going on here. So, well. There she goes. Oh.
Most of us pirates, we go on vacation to North Dakota, you know, because they've got a town called Argusville. What are you smoking there, boy?
This is Dan Michaels from danmichaelsaudio.com, and you're listening to Radical Russ on cannabisradio.com.
Tokers, there's no good reason to get your dog stoned. While it might not harm them physically, imagine being a dog who already begs for treats all day, and then imagine that dog having the munchies. Not cool.
All right, welcome back, everybody. 50 after the hour. You know, no matter how much I upgrade my machine, it seems like I can always find a way to lock it up. Sorry about that difficulty there, but we are back and better than ever, and wanted to talk a little bit about this story concerning the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who has recently come out against marijuana legalization. And it's a story that I had up on the browser, and again, now I can't find it. So let's move to this other story. Oh, it's only Wednesday, folks. Representative Rohrabacher, Dana Rohrabacher, part of the Cannabis Caucus in the Congress, has just introduced the Respect State Marijuana Laws Act. According to townhall.com, during the Obama administration, 8 states plus D.C. legalized recreational pot. DOJ generally had a hands-off policy. Dana Rohrabacher, who's a medical marijuana patient himself, has introduced the Respect State Marijuana Laws Act. The bill would protect people from being prosecuted under the Controlled Substances Act as long as they're following their particular state laws. He introduced it before in 2015 and in 2013. We will see how well this does in the current Congress, but that's what we've got. So the confirmation of Jeff Sessions, we got some more information on that. The committee that voted him out went 11-9 party line vote. And then the cloture motion on his nomination to stop the Democratic filibuster passed 52-47 and confirmed Attorney General in a 52-47 vote. So again, all 52 Republicans voting for Sessions, all 47 Dems and independents voting against, and it appears that there's one abstention. And so there we go. It's official. We've got Jeff Sessions as our Attorney General. Also, a story I wanted to tell you about coming out of New Zealand. Now, New Zealand has been moving slowly on its medical cannabis regulations. And this story is entitled Medicinal Cannabis Still Too Costly for Christchurch Woman, out of Christchurch, New Zealand. The prime minister there has decided to allow some use of medical cannabis products, but the price of them is out of reach for this particular woman in the story. And it has to do with the GW Pharmaceuticals preparation called Sativex or Sativex, which is the whole plant extract tincture. It's a spray that has been approved in the UK and New Zealand and some of these other countries for the treatment of chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, and so forth. She suffers from fibromyalgia, has had it since February of 2011. She had been on a concoction of medications to take care of the pain, but they weren't effective and had all sorts of terrible side effects. As usual, she'd used cannabis illegally to treat her pain, and she said it worked more effectively than the medications, but she says, quote, "I didn't want to break the law anymore." So the associate health minister there in New Zealand, Peter Dunn, announced rules that access for medical cannabis would be loosened. Currently, they have to take their case to the Minister of Health to sign off on medicinal cannabis products. Now, she was hoping that this meant she'd be able to get medicinal cannabis products, on a regular basis. The problem is a month's worth of this Sativex spray would cost her $1,300. $1,300 a month for GW Pharmaceuticals Sativex spray. Do you know how much weed you can get for $1,300 a month, even in New Zealand? Far more than you would need in a month, even this lady with fibromyalgia. One of the most frustrating things about this development of medical cannabis throughout the world is how we're taking something that is a natural plant, that is a weed, that is fairly easy to cultivate, something that is compared to $1,300 a month, fairly cheap, a cheap, natural, no side effects, no terrible side effects type of a drug, and we're finding a way to overprice it and make it less effective. It's weird to think that we may be entering a phase where, medicinal cannabis has been legalized, but it's more difficult and expensive to deal with than the illegal cannabis. I mean, that used to be the big issue, right? Was that, oh my God, patients, they need this cannabis and it's $300 an ounce. Well, now this lady's like, gee, $300 an ounce, that'd be great. Compared to $1,300 for a little bottle of spray. But this is what I've warned. I've warned about this since 2009, that medical cannabis is a box canyon. When you cede to our opponents the notion that you can only smoke pot if you've got a good enough reason, you are giving up your human right to use that plant any way you damn well choose for whatever reason you want. And when you allow a third party to be the arbiter, you also allow that third party to be the arbiter of what medical cannabis is. It has to be a spray. It has to be an inhaler. It has to be a tincture. It can't be smoked. Oh my God, smoking is evil. The only path forward for those of us who want to use whole plant, cheap, accessible, natural cannabis is legalization. Because only legalization says you're an adult, you can use it. Period. No arbiter, no paperwork, no decision by a board or a doctor whether or not you're worthy. You're an adult, you get to use it. This continued battle for medical cannabis can only lead to the bottom line for GW Pharmaceuticals. The continuation of saying that marijuana is only a medicine, should only be available for very sick people, leads us straight into the waiting arms of the investors in GW Pharmaceuticals. It guarantees that they're going to do everything in their power to make sure marijuana fits in that pill bottle, that fits that pill paradigm. They're going to make it expensive. They're going to make it something you have to keep coming back to get, something you have to depend on them for. And that's contrary to what the miracle of medical marijuana is. The miracle of medical marijuana isn't that it's a plant that can relieve a lot of symptoms and such. I mean, that true enough, that's that's miraculous. But the real miracle is that it shatters the paradigm of having to go to the learned men in the white coats with the special degrees to get our healing. Medical marijuana makes it so we can grow our own medicine. We can take care of ourselves. We can cut the middleman out of the whole equation. But if you keep fighting for medical marijuana only, you're advocating for the middleman. You're asking for the pharmaceuticalization of cannabis. I know how clear it can be. Oh boy, well that sound means that we're done. Time flies when you legalize. The first hour video replay of this show will be available on YouTube after the show. And the first hour podcast will be available on cannabisradio.com or through all the usual outlets on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, and TuneIn. Hour 2 is just for you live listeners and live viewers. And once the Radical Russ VIP site is up, you'll be able to get your replays of Hour 2 there. For everyone here at Delta 9 Studios, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.
You can find Radical Russ online everywhere. Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, SoundCloud, Snapchat, LinkedIn, and Boise State University's 2400 baud modem bulletin board system from 1985.